Thank you for being here. My name is Asma Al-Halabi. I'm an assistant professor of history here at U of T. And it's a real honor to convene this event. First off, I must thank the Jackman Humanities Institute Program for the Arts for their generous financial support, Hearing Palestine for its logistical support, the Toronto Palestine Film Festival for co-presenting this evening, and Maen Hammad, Roy Saada, and Hawawa Books for producing the occasion for this gathering. Skateboarding and photography have a long relationship. Most skateboarding takes place without a mass of spectators, and the average trick is over in a matter of seconds. So the photographer and the skateboarder are an inseparable pair. The true content of a photograph is invisible, John Berger once wrote, for it derives from a clay not with form, but with time. The photographer's ability to stop the world and the skateboard from spinning made them essential to the skateboarder, and skateboarding's popular culture lent itself to intimacy. As Maen beautifully captures in his book, skateboarding's criminality, its repetitions, its intensity, improvisation, and its abundant moments of idleness between its perennial forward movement all provide ample opportunity for the skateboarder and the photographer to develop a bond beyond the frame. So any follower of skateboarding's culture of print will have been initiated into its visual world, the flash and the shadow, the sequence and the fisheye. Grant Britton and Tony Hawk, Atiba Jefferson and Eric Costin, Maen Hammad and Aram Saba, skateboarding and photography. So too is the history of Palestine and photography entwined. Before its physical conquest in the 20th century, Palestine was captured as an image. The messianic energies of 19th century Holy Land mania was synchronous with the proliferation of the photograph. Orientalism stole the visual landscape of Palestine long before the Zionists. Stephen Sheehi wrote in his contribution to the revelatory 22-volume Camera Palaestina. And now we are faced with millions, if not billions, when the TikToks are separated frame by frame of images of Palestinian death and mutilation. This superabundance of visual testimony to genocide has at once effectively, perhaps irrevocably, broken the wall of Western censorship and denial for a generation, and at the same time flooded our senses with a particular image of the Palestinian as victim, as collection of limbs, as target. But there are other images of Palestinians, buried, sometimes literally, beneath that wreckage. To see them requires some refusals and considerable resistance to the genocidal regime of visuality which confronts us now. Tamara Abdul Hadi has repeatedly demanded we decolonize our imaginations. Amidst an imperial culture which inundated us with images of evil Arab men, the bearded bin Laden, the mustached Saddam, the pointy Jafar, Abdul Hadi assembled crisp and tender countervisual in her 2022 book, Picture an Arab Man. To narrate ourselves now as neither helpless victim or menacing evil is the challenge we face, as ever. So we arrive then here. We're privileged to bring these three into conversation, to launch an essential document. Before meetings like this are suspended and books like these are banned, we do this work. We're here to scrutinize Palestinian life and to view clearly an anti-colonial image. Needless to say, I'm a fan of the assembly of people here, and it's a great pleasure to introduce them. Maen Hammad, whose first photo book you can purchase right outside. Put the book up, you can see the cover there, right? Is a documentary photographer. Hammad was born in Palestine, raised in the American suburbs of Michigan, and is currently based in the occupied West Bank. Maen has had his images exhibited in New York, Paris, Dubai, Florence, and elsewhere. He also has work in the permanent collection of the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. Maen has had his thoughts and images published in Time, ID, The New Yorker, and Days. He's a Magnum Foundation grantee and recipient of the Arab Documentary Photography Program and holds a MA in International Affairs from the George Washington University. Besides Maen's work in documentary photography, he's also a human rights researcher and campaigner. Stephen Sheehi is Sultan Qaboos Professor of Middle East Studies in the Asian Middle East Studies program at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, where he's also the director of the Decolonizing Humanities Project. Having published on psychoanalysis, Arab photography, Arab identity, and colonial modernity, and Islamophobia and racism, his most recent book is Camera Palaestina, Photography in Displaced Histories, with contributions by Salim Tamari and Hassan Massar, published by University of California Press in 2022, and Palestine, Psychoanalysis Under Occupation, Practicing Resistance in Palestine, co-authored by Lara Sheehi, published by Routledge in 2022 as well, which won the Palestine Book Award for Best Academic Book on Palestine. He and Nader Shahoub Kevorkian most recently co-edited a special issue of State Crime Journal entitled Settler Colonialism as State Crime, Abolitionist Perspectives. His current book project is tentatively called On Guerrilla Intimacies, Social Objects, the Decolonial Present. Tamara Abdul Hadi is an interdisciplinary artist and teacher, working primarily with the medium of photography. Her research-intensive art practice investigates the close relationship between photography and empire, found in ongoing mechanisms of epistemic violence and the visual representation of people from the Middle East and North Africa. Her photographs have been exhibited worldwide, and her debut monograph, Picture an Arab Man, was published in 2022. She's currently the 2024-25 Artist in Residence at the Jackman Humanities Institute, and her current book project, Reimagining Return to the Marshes, is due to be published in fall 2025. And I should mention that you can see a taste of this work at the Doris McCarthy Gallery at UTSC until the end of May, if you make it that way east. Without further ado, I pass it to my esteemed guests. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Asmat. Thank you, Taman and Stefan. I'm honored to be sitting here with you, really, truly. So we're here to celebrate Maen and celebrate Maen's book, which is basically, I would say, your first book and your first book event in Toronto, right? So this is the debut of the book, and so Maen, thank you for bringing us together, and thank you for being here. And I don't think we can begin this without acknowledging the while we sit here, Israel has continued its barbaric genocidal campaign against Palestine and Lebanon. And so I just wanted to say that sort of just to take a moment. So I think this will be sort of a conversation between the three of us. And I will pass it to you to sort of get us started, Maen, and give us a feel of the book in whatever way you choose. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Asmat, for such a beautiful intro. Need that as my new LinkedIn bio. It feels really special to be here with you all. My name is Maen Hammad, and I'm super happy to be launching Landing at the University of Toronto and to this world, to have you all in company with me as I speak about it with some of my favorite people who, for the first time, are meeting, and you get to hear us have a sort of really beautiful conversation about this work. I want to give like a 3-minute overview of what Landing is, just so that I can lay it out for all of us. And then when photos and different readings happen throughout our talk, you have a sort of background to get the gist of it. Landing is a documentary photography project and documentary writing project that looks at skateboarding in Palestine, and a collective of 5 skaters, including myself, who use skateboarding as a purposeful escape to get themselves out of the confines of the layers of Israeli settler colonial domination in the occupied West Bank. I'm a Palestinian American. I am a photographer, but I think one of my biggest core identities is that I'm actually a skateboarder. And from the age of 9, I started skating in Michigan, thanks to my wonderful mother, who bought me my first skateboard as a little kid. And I immediately got hooked on it and sort of allowed myself to be enthralled in this world of skateboarding from a very young age. In 2014, I moved to Palestine serendipitously to just take an Arabic class at a university, and I ended up finding Palestinian skateboarders in a very small little Christian village. And it was from that moment that I sort of had this whirlwind of a moment of beginning to think of documenting the skateboard scene. At the time, it was never a project. It was just a sort of fascination with skateboarding in Palestine, these two worlds that sort of held very important roles in my life, sort of coming together. The book itself follows those events from 2014 to 2022, with a narrative around the 2021 Palestinian uprising called the Unity Uprising, when across historic Palestine, Palestinians were revolting against Israel's settler rule, and includes 22 essays, poems, interviews, and prose around both those events as well as my documentation of this really beautiful scene. So that's an overview of the project, and I'm going to be doing a few readings, and Stefan has also curated a selection of some of the works that we'll be talking about as well.
Would you like to start with a reading?
I can. And I need to stop and pause to celebrate Roy Saad, my designer, curator, editor, book publisher, comrade, and video DJ for the event. So this is a reading actually from a very lovely little love story in Palestine by my friend Kilani and his girlfriend at the time named Dela. I won't say much more. I'll read. Kilani met Tala on Instagram, where they began talking and crushing on one another. Skating is what they had in common. They chatted as friends for 2 months before they started dating. Kilani is a university student in the West Bank city of Nablus, and Tala is in university in Haifa, in 48 Palestine. Kilani is a Muslim, and Tala is a Christian. Enough, perhaps, to complicate their love. However, their religion is nothing compared to Israel's apartheid. Kilani told me, I would never do a long-distance relationship. Instead, we call it a medium-distance relationship. The first time Kilani illegally crossed into 48 was in November 2020. This was the first time he met Tala in person. He told me, it was so bizarre. It was like entering a foreign country, which is still my country. The first time they met in person, they sat on a curb for hours in Haifa. They had been dating for 2 months at the time, and Tala cried when she first saw him. Innocence is taken prisoner in Palestine, pummeled by fragmentation and made comatose in enclaves. Youthful, drunken love can be so difficult to sip. I asked Kilani if I could go with him the next time he crossed. As per his request, I called him 2 times at 8 a.m. to wake him up while I was in the taxi to Nablus. I met him at Al-Mustashfa Al-Watani. He was on the phone already trying to coordinate with the multiple drivers for the multiple pickup points. The first driver skidded to a stop under the shade of a Dukkan's Nestle umbrella and shouted from the window, I thought I was taking day laborers to the checkpoint, not students. He was taking us first to Barta, about 1 hour away from Nablus, almost to the tip of the West Bank, where a portal exists. Most people refer to them as checkpoints, the state-sanctioned trap of penciled-in borders. A portal, on the other hand, is magic, surmounting the concession of permission to be home at home. A portal is a hole in the wall, an opening in the fence, a hint that we exist in a past, present, and future where walls crumble. As we took our initial footsteps out of the car, Kilani was gazing between the valleys, trying to remember the way to the hole. We had to walk through a handful of hills to get to the opening. The portal's hole was the size of an elephant. Kilani was negotiating the perfect time to sprint across with the next driver. Yalla, the driver shouted. He peeked over the horizon line to triple-check that there were no jeeps on patrol. We both gripped our boards and sprinted across. Looking back, it is silly how easy it was. I mean, it was purposely not difficult to cross. Why? Because Israel survives off of the 200,000 Palestinians who cross illegally every day to work as cheap labor. The taxi driver was an older Palestinian man with slick black sunglasses and an incessant reminder that he never picked us up. He started throwing out strategic translations for us to memorize, from Arabic to Hebrew. How can we get to Haifa? We are not from here. Wait, no, I am from here. We needed to take a bus to the skate park while we waited for Tala to arrive. On the bus, there were only 2 open spots, and they were next to an Israeli soldier. In 48, the soldiers ride the bus and order lattes at cafes. Their uniforms are just a part of the occupation's wardrobe, and just about everyone you see has worn that suit. It is paralyzing trying to digest how normalized the violence enacted in the name of that suit is regurgitated. Just a few dozen kilometers away, there are battalions in that suit, raiding every Bantustan. It's unhinged just how much calm can camouflage crimes against humanity. Earlier, Kilani told me, whenever I cross, I have to unlearn myself and act like a different person. I looked at his hands as they dug into the wood of his skateboard. He was unlearning. I felt the same anxiety when we got to the skate park in Haifa. Anywhere else in the world, a skate park is usually a safe haven for me. But I had such resistance to skating in Haifa. I was not comfortable skating with 2B current or ex-soldiers. Going into 48 is always discombobulating, as much as I convinced myself that being there is a breath of fresh air. It was instead an airtight squeeze, knocking every last breath out of my lungs. 48 is held together by the shaking knees of our ghosts, generations in a dispossessed purgatory, breathing in memory and exhaling rage. About an hour passed, and Tala made her way to the skate park. She and Kilani caressed one another. They continued for the next 4 hours. They were so in love. I became aware that I never had anything like that in my youth. They definitely did not care to seem for my presence. I do not know if kissing was their only goal, knowing they would not see one another for a whole month, or longer. They were, I imagine, trying to fulfill their quota. I told Kilani that we should at least go to the sea, given we had made it this far. It is visible from Nablus where he lives. We found a nook on the Mediterranean and enjoyed the company of silence. We had to start the journey home at 8 p.m., and I could tell he and Tala were feeling the inevitable heartbreak of fragmentation again. He told her, "Give me some time, and I promise you I will marry you." He told me, "When I am with Tala, I feel like I am at home." We went to the skate park one last time before we had to leave. I took a photo of him trying to land the kickflip he was trying the whole day. He landed it, and Tala was filming him. While doing the trick, he entered back into the portal, back to the Bantustan he was born into, the gulag, the prison, the hara, the balad, and all the other words that will expire, all the shadows that call their way home. He disappeared into thin air like we had never even come to 48. I took the phone from him this time and coordinated our pickups with the drivers. Once we crossed back, Kilani turned his phone on. He found dozens of missed calls from his mother. She yelled at him, telling him that a chauffeur had called the house line, asking when he should pick us up from the portal. She knew the potentially deadly danger of crossing illegally. He is a smart kid and made up a white lie to buy himself time as he shuffled between WhatsApp messages to find a friend who could back up his story. I need a cigarette, he said.
Wow, thank you for that, man. There's one part of this very moving story that really stuck in my head, which is when you said Kilani has to unlearn himself. And I wonder if you also feel that way yourself, in your own way. I think something that this story teaches us or hints at is the different experiences that Palestinians have in Palestine, and the different Palestinian experiences under Israeli occupation and oppression, whether it's the West Bank, Jerusalem, the 48, and Kilani and I forget the name.
Tala.
Kilani and Tala's story, I'm sure, has happened before, right? And it still happens. So I wanted to ask you that yourself, just in terms of how do you relate to that, when he says, "I unlearn myself."
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think more of my unlearning is unlearning bits and pieces of my American identity that are baked within me. I was born in Palestine, but I moved to Michigan when I was 2 and lived there until I was 21 years old, basically. So my formidable years, my mother tongue, my sort of relationship with my entire youth was kind of in a place that is antithetical to Palestine in so many ways. I say when I moved to Palestine, I was American Palestinian, but it took me a few years to become Palestinian American, like to flip that script a little bit. But I definitely feel it, even to this day. And I think for those of us in the diaspora, you know, it might feel weird in the beginning to be like critiqued about your identity, especially if you're moving back to a homeland that you're so eager to go to. But you kind of have to face that. Yeah, this is I hold that identity deep within me, and it's something I'm always and forever going to be unlearning.
And I think that you took something with you to Palestine that you, in a sense, learned in America, which was skateboarding, and you translated that into, I think, and I believe through reading the book, a way that you reconnected with Palestine.
Yes. The timing of it was all really interesting because I had in university stopped skating for a few years, and when I went back to Palestine, I sort of reconnected to Palestine as a place and also to this culture and this craft of skateboarding at the same time, sort of in their own concurrent ways, but at the same time were it allowed me or provided me this sort of portal into being Palestinian in my own way through skateboarding, which was something that was super important to me growing up. And I got to connect with all of these different skaters, and still to this day I'm close to all of them, and it allowed me to yeah.
I think there is one thing that I actually yeah, Roy was saying that maybe we can have conversation, open it up to questions if you like. But I also, just before that, wanted to mention something about the book, specifically and physically. I happen to be very close to the person who designed the book and published the book. And so I have the privilege of seeing this project become the book that it is. And actually also, because I've known you for a while and I've seen this project come to life in a sense, since 2022, I believe. So there's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. One of them is the cover and the title, Landing, and and the cover. And I think that they are interconnected, but I maybe wanted you to talk a little bit about the title and the cover if you want.
Yeah, so the title Landing, what I had thought that it meant has grown in meanings over the production of this book. In the context of stating landing, a trick is the essence of skateboarding. You know, you progress to get good, you practice to land different tricks in different ways. But I also really love the title because of the ing in landing. Like landing is there's an impermanence to the title. There's like an impermanence to skateboarding and to my own connection back to Palestine of sort of getting into my own connection back to the place, but through skateboarding as this vehicle. And the cover itself is actually the back of my skateboard, with different marks, trying different attempts to land tricks, not just to land tricks in the sort of very real, immediate sense, but also in the broader terminology of the project itself. Landing in Palestine is also our impermanence and struggle to land, to getting our land back, to our connection to this land, and the attempts and the marks and the sacrifices that landing a trick entails. So Roy actually had encouraged me to take a few photos of my skateboard because he, across designing this book, had seen the back of boards and was always intrigued by them. He's like, they look so cool, and it's almost like an abstractness to it. And the cover, as you'll see, is blank. There's no name, there's no title, because it's actually multiple pages that flip with the letter getting bigger of landing throughout each page, and a small poem that introduces one of the entries of Budaeus.
Yeah, so exactly. So it starts L.
A-N-D-I-N-G. All of that together is kind of the cover, as opposed to just one page of a name and a title and a publisher. So it's kind of testament to this idea of land in Palestine, landing as an impermanence, landing for my own sake as a skater. And then one time we were on Roy and I had multiple philosophy Zoom calls, well, as we built this book. And I remember one time he ends a call as we're talking about the title, and he's like, I get it now, you know. He's like, landing. And I was like, yeah, landing, that's what it's called. He's like, no, landing. So he put landing as one of the titles as well.
Thank you so much, Maen. Would you like, because I know you want to do another reading.
Switched some of the photos.
Yeah. Do you want to switch? Okay.
And then we can.
And then do.
We're good on time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're totally good on time.
Because I'm very excited to speak to my friend Stefan about these images.
Yeah.
And to share some of the work.
First, I want to thank everyone. Thank you, past month, and everyone coming out, and especially Maen for this great piece of work. I got so much to say, so forgive me for being a little slow because I'm just trying to like process everything. You know, number one, I just also want to, I think for grounding us in the present genocide. Maen and I were walking over and was just thinking about like how does one think about a book that was written before a genocide, and then what it sort of it means now. I know as a scholar, you know, you write things, you spend many years, and then you sort of like one day you wake up and like mass murder is happening in front of your eyes and no one's doing anything about it, and you're like, who cares about what I'm doing, right? Because you have to kind of feel what in this work is telling of that moment. And I think, some of the things that started off this book make me think was, the idea that skateboarding is about the built environment, and it's about place, right? And so I'm going to quote you at one point. You say, skateboarding is a critique of space. And then later on to the next page, you said, in Palestine, this occurs as a spatial critique of explicit and mundane violence, right? So like, when you're like, dumbass bourgeois America, it's like skateboarding, dude, cups suck, God. But it becomes like, what happens? Skateboarding is about freedom, dude, right? But what happens when freedom means something else, right? And what do you do when this craft, or as you called it, is moving in a space where there's no space? And something what you said in the book is, you put out, is this in the space of airtight squeeze. So it's moving in the space of absolute immobility, right? So I just had, I love this image. We could talk about that. Which actually, so I like this image just because it's like, it sets it up. You're like literally skating into the light. You're skating into the portal. You're skating out of this, into this, out of this darkness into the light. Which I love that. But so sorry for like goofy, like I got all nerdy about photography, right? I like, there's these 3 pictures I told you that I kind of like think that set up this idea of skating and space and the embodiment of it. And there's this one, which is you have, and I don't know if you like did this design wise on purpose, but there's like an unfolding of perspective of the skater, right? So here we have like this like a completely organic like skate park here, right? Which is great, with the city kind of above him and sort of like looming above him, almost like encasing him or coming behind him or as a backdrop. And this one, there's a little bit out of the order that I would have liked it, but this is I would like this the last one, but this one is like the city now is engulfing him and enveloping and hugging him and caressing him, sort of bringing him in, right? And this one is, again, it's kind of like, this guy almost looks, I swear to God, I looked at this for a long time. Did he superimpose this guy? This looks like so photoshopped, right? And here he is, and it's the image of you looking up at, so there's one you're looking at, eye to eye, one is you're looking down, and one you're looking up. And so you're giving like dimensionality to Palestine, the place where space is being suffocated, right? So I think maybe, that's just those images I just want to shoot out at first. And then there's, this one I have so much to say about it, but I'm going to hold on to it because I love this image a lot. But maybe we can think about like telling, like about skating as a practice, but that one that is not, not unique in many ways. Like there are other practices Palestinians do, but like what is it doing in that space to sort of critique the suffocating space in which occupation, puts on Palestinians.
But I really love when people read my photos because I see things I never saw and I get sparked with all these different ideas as well. The main argument I made in my head for many years before this project became a project was thinking, okay, skateboarding for me in the US was always important, and I always felt that it was this way to decompress after, a tough day in public school, or, some band I liked didn't release an album or something to be happy. Skating was a way for me to just be out in space and with my friends and my neighbors and to build a small little community, to make some skate photos and make a little video for MySpace. But in Palestine, I felt yes to all of that. And to your point about space, skateboarding felt so much more powerful in that the actual physical act of putting wheels on the ground and finding a set of stairs at Plaza, for example, where this is, to be embodied in that space with your people around you, with your friends around you, and to commit yourself to landing a trick. So Aram, for example, was like, this day, I'm going to land a shove-it on the 3. It's never been done before in Palestine. Man, where are you? Can you film it? Can you get a photo of it? The act of him deciding to make that in the context of also that week, I don't know how many times the Israeli regime probably raided Ramallah or escalated violence in all of the different governance of Palestine, or how many weeks or months after an Israeli assault on Gaza that was. The context of the Palestinian reality of forever encroaching land theft and suffocation and death and destruction, and at the same time saying, man, I want to land a shove-it on the big 3 and I want you to photograph me, is so powerful for me as a skateboarder, that I felt this can't just be something I'm thinking. And I brought this question to all these skaters in different ways, and they answered it very differently. For many of them, some of them were just like, it's all I know and I love to skate. And for me, that's a fair answer, because that's the same reason that I did it. But as I kept probing this question and going through it with myself in other contexts, like you said, whether it's parkour, circus, BMX, inline skate, graffiti, all of the different subcultures that exist in the West that utilize space, there's an added layer of, there's added stakes to it when Palestine and land are so interconnected and space is so interconnected to every decision you make or every step you take, whether it's in the subconscious, in the mundane, or in the explicit. And selfishly, as a Palestinian skateboarder, there's also a long history of, as Asmat had beautifully put, a visual diary of documenting your scene. There's almost a responsibility for different skate scenes to document their scene so that other skate scenes know that it exists. So that, for example, if somebody from Toronto ever came to Ramallah, they could never take a photo doing a shove-it on the 3 because it's already been done. Aram did it. It's been documented. It's in landing. And that, for me, selfishly, is a huge reason that I did this book, because it puts Palestinian skateboarding on the map for my skate community, which is a global community, and also to connect it to all of these different threads that you had so beautifully put.
So I look at photography like very much as an associative process, you know. So I kind of see in images about that things that aren't there, but that enable its meaning, right? So I just think about, as much as I was watching this and these 3 images, I thought about compression, right, and how it works against compression, right? And that kind of brings me this issue of portal, like you were saying, and escape. And then, like, escape, when I read it the first couple of times, like, I was like, okay, it wasn't really serving anything well, right? Because it's kind of seems like escapist. And so, like, I was just thinking, but the more I think about it, the more I want to translate it in terms of, like, the portal, and, like, where is the portal take us? And where is the portal taking us?
I think I felt similarly with the word escape, and there was a bit of it that felt like I'm not trying to make this like some weird liberal reality where like Palestinians just need skateboards to escape so much of the pain that's happening, but instead to provide the first part of that clause, which is purposeful escape. I felt like skating here provides, and I never say just escape, I always almost combine those 2 words, because the purposefulness of it is consensual and voluntary to knowing the relationship you're having with that skateboard. It's not escaping and giving up. It's being tender to yourself and kind with your body and your space to say, for a breath of fresh air, I'm going to provide myself a purposeful escape. To be with myself, to be with my friends, and to be with my lands. And in the context of this, the land isn't also an oriental or a sort of cheesy depiction of a Palestinian olive tree. The land is concrete and it's violent. It's the architecture of occupation almost. And the portal in this sense, I use portal a lot in the book. I think it's it means many things. In one sense, in the reading with medium distance relationship.
The fence image. Sorry, how do you?
Yeah. Which we'll pull up. The portal is the hole in the fence. The portal is going into historic Palestine, which for me felt kind of like the video game Portal, like you're like blasting into this world through a hole in the fence that you've created. And in a way, skateboarding for me is also, it provides that power when you click your board and you're floating for that momentary second, you're in limbo, but you're also in another world. And the world around you exists, right? Like in the photos of us skating in Ramallah or in any sort of urban cityscape, there's always people around you watching you and they're confused as to what you're doing. But it doesn't matter for you because you're actually in your own world. They're there in presence, but they're not there with you. And I felt that the portal, the use of the portal in this sense is multifaceted in that it's magic to get you into historic Palestine. And it's also magic while you're on your skateboard to get you out of the occupation.
Right. I love this image, by the way. Also, I don't know if we'll get to it, and I'm going to skip the line here for a second. I love this image because it like shows you how it's like how a skateboarder sees space, right? I always think about that, like how a skateboarder gets there because they see space in a particular sort of way, right? And they also have to think about also how that space is also, is this going to be safe? Are there going to be pigs around? In North America, you got to think probably other things where people have guns and shoot and children don't care, especially if you're male, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't get all corny because, you know, like we always think like, oh, everything is resistance, but that's kind of like, so can you get that one image of the three skateboarders just sitting on the
Stairs?
on the stairs? So when I was thinking about this, like I wanted to be loyal to you as a photographer and you as a skater at the same time, but then also ground this in Palestine because where it emerges from, right? So to think about the portal as something moving forward always. If we have a three-dimensionality, we also can have the other fifth dimensionality. We'll also go where every time you go through the portal, and you might come back, but you have gone to the portal and you got that closer. You don't visit historic Palestine and go back. You've gone probably with historic Palestine. That's your place. You've broken that boundary. I don't want to curse now at the end. You violated the sovereignty of the Israeli state, though the sanctified sovereignty that they massacre Palestinians for. This dumbass freaking skateboarders walk through to go, you know, to see his girlfriend, right? So there's an element, a real political element about this mastery of space. And I love this image because it's a very dangerous image. And it's a very brave image trying for you to show. Because if you see the close-up, which is, you know, nowadays in this environment, this will get you in trouble. Right? She has a weapon and she's pointing it at the person who's coming. So like maybe I don't want to be all corny, but like thinking about skateboard as a practice of resistance within Palestine, you know.
Yeah, I think the individual stories that all of the Palestinians in the book have, they practice this version of resisting the state in their own ways. And for Kilani, it's him breaking through the sanctity of a settler colonial enterprise to see his girlfriend, which is, it could get him killed. Like him crossing could get him killed. For some of the other skaters, and it's not in these images, and why it was an important conversation that I sort of propose this as a thesis of purposeful escape, because in the book itself, I actually don't think I provide an answer. because during the Unity Uprising, none of us were skating. So I ask myself, well, if I think it's such a big deal and it's so important, how come at a time when I need it the most, I'm not touching my skateboard? How come at a time right now during the ongoing genocide, I'm not really skating that much? So it's to pause there and say, I don't know if it's actually this escape. But during the uprising, Aram, for example, had stopped skating, who's one of the protagonists in this book, and I stumbled into him twice at the protests. Also in sort of very serendipitous ways, and he's a skater who, for him, I know how important skateboarding is. There's a text exchange in the book where he says, my mental health is getting weaker with no skate. And we sort of have chopped conversation. We're not seeing each other as much. And during one of the protests, I see his welcome skate hoodie. He's the only person in Palestine that has a welcome skate hoodie, walking into a fiery protest with a rock in his hand, going to throw it at a Zionist. And in those moments, I sort of ask myself, what the hell's the point of skateboarding right now? It's a stupid thing. It's irrelevant. And in the book, if you all get it or read it, I don't want to tease too much, but it doesn't just end there. There's a question back to what the purpose is.
There's a couple of things. One of them is I was going to read the little caption at the top of this image. On the side, it says, a network of hundreds of Israeli checkpoints works to dominate and control the lives of millions of Palestinians living under Israel's brutal military occupation. Here is the skaters' reenactment of being on the other side of the checkpoint. And I think you have these small, very informative captions in a lot of the images, right? I wanted to take the word portal and go in another direction in the book, which is, here, I'm going to actually give you the book and ask you to open one of the gatefolds. So in the book, there are five gatefolds, which are in design lingo, a page that opens out of the book, like that. And so there's 5 of these, and each of them belong to one of 5 photographers, one of 5 skaters that Maen photographed and actually hung out with and spent time with and skated with. And these skaters are the protagonists, basically, of this book. And these presentations or these little stories, each one is unique to the skater. And you were saying the other day that in a way they're a portal into the world of the skater. And this portal is for the audience as they're looking through the book. They find these very different looking than the rest of the book, really, these gatefolds. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to share a bit about these very beautifully designed.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually.
Yeah, and there are also images here with no captions, I think, that you did on purpose. So I wanted you, to share a little bit about that. And I can hold the book while you're...
I'm actually
I want to read
enough to do a reading from one of the
Yeah.
portal captions of these skaters. For the first question about the captions, and this is to bring Roy into the conversation. When I first emailed Roy in 2021, I asked him if he would help me design a book, and I was very naive. I said, I want it to be, a kind of quick book, images, it'll hopefully be out this year. It was in 2021. We spent many years developing out this project, and much of that time was actually just Zoom calls to figure out what we wanted this body of work to do. Him asking me amazing prompts to make sure that this book didn't fall into some of the design and photo book traps that sort of exist in this world of ours. And part of that was him asking me for some context, where I sent him a few articles or entries that I had written to provide context, and he was like, whoa, we need to have this be part of the book. And as a photographer, especially documentary photographer, that's kind of like haram. Text in a photo book doesn't really work that much in the sort of contemporary art book world. But instead, we actually held the context of Palestine as such an important value to the production of this book and this project that made it that we actually are very much acknowledging that this book, we're trying to inform and hold the narrative almost entirely. We don't want the reader to have to assume things. In the context of Palestine, I actually want you to know that these skaters are reenacting a checkpoint and what checkpoints mean to Palestinians. And Roy is an incredible designer where he allowed 60 pages of text in a Word document to sort of sing along and be in harmony with this book. And part of that was these footnotes that I include in many of these different photos, especially as a Lebanese friend who's never been to Palestine. He was almost mesmerized by some of the insights that these little bits and pieces of information held for somebody who's never been to Palestine, but knows so much about it as this idea. And the footnotes for us were sort of, they're there for people to read, to know that it's there, but it's not in your face. You don't have to see it. You can read this book as a photo book by just looking at the images, but you can also dive into the text, which in a way has its own, the text and visual narrative sort of have their own counterparts that combine. And part of the text also was making sure that the skaters and the protagonists in this story were also brought in and along with the ride. So part of this portal and this gatefold idea, I had actually, Roy had moved to Montreal at this point, and I shipped him a bunch of Thrasher magazines. Thrasher's it's a really big skate magazine, and I was like, I want bits and pieces of skate culture to be in the book. I don't know how to do it, but I'm sure you can. And these portal gatefolds are actually a sort of tribute to both skate zine culture as well as these protagonists, where I had many portraits that I had taken of them, and I had sort of asked them individually, which of these photos is your favorite and how can I introduce you? And here's 2 disposable cameras. Photograph your world. I want you to have some of your images as a part of it. And they had sort of asked me like, well, what do you want me to photograph? I was like, I don't know. Photograph your world. So many of the photos are them skating, them eating a shawarma sandwich, them hanging out with other skaters. And I include an interview with all of them. And the interview itself is something that I had as a conversation with them in 2021 when I was going through this process of this question of skateboarding. So these different gatefolds are sort of a way for the reader to not just know the skater in a sort of abstract sense, but to sort of be with them along the ride. And we mentioned them before they're first mentioned in the story, which was an interesting way of us being like, well, we're at least bringing them in. So I can read, for example, it's a short quote. This is Adham, one of my skaters. This is a quote he had in his portal. They normalized struggle for us. They made us condition that struggle is normal and that you gotta not succeed. Fuck that. It always goes back to you as a person. It's a dead-end world, but it's not. It's a test. Arif nafsak, which means know yourself. And I simply just asked them to provide a introduction to who they are.
Thank you, man. Stefan, do you want to do some more image reading?
Yeah, there are I guess 2 really bits I want to talk about maybe. And you say our intention was, could we get the little kids up? Just so adorable. So our intention was that the kids would carry on skating while we built. We were wrong. They encircled us with engrossed eyes, Slowly, as the individual pieces transformed into a curious wonder, they began to huddle around us. And then you later said, this small gesture of creation was a political act, built in dedication of the future of Palestinians on skateboards. Yeah, so can you maybe tell us about that whole project? I mean, there's a political dimension to it. There's the adorable connection to it. There's the skateboarding connection to it. So yeah, can you kind of talk more about that?
Yeah. So if you all remember, I said the book follows the Unity Uprising as this sort of temporal timeline of this project, and the book kind of ends in this slump where I'm no longer skating, and about a month and a half goes by where Aram hits me up, one of the protagonists in the book, and he tells and asks if we should do a DIY project. And DIY stands for do it yourself. For skaters, it's sort of our way to make use of space by creating a sort of improvised skate spot or skate park in usually private property or public space that you can sort of commandeer. And we had never built anything in Palestine, just the two of us. So we went to a najjar or a woodworking shop, bought a bunch of wood, was online on like this weird open source ramp website and on this weird open source rail website. And he had screenshotted a bunch of these photos and were speaking to a najjar and a haddad, a metal blacksmith, showing this 55-year-old Palestinian carpenter who like could not be bothered with us. Like, we want to make this ramp and we want to do this rail, and he's like, what the fuck? And he's like, okay, I'll do it, whatever. And we get the stuff, and it was a beautiful process because for me it was also the first time that both of us were building in Palestine after this uprising when none of us were skating. So it sort of was this cathartic way to like propose back this question of skating back to us. And we brought all of this material to a Sarriya club where we were running skate classes because it was the only place that we were like, well, we don't have space to do a DIY. We're just going to do it in the place that we run classes. And it was really beautiful because we brought all of this wood and we thought that we would just get it done in a few hours and, you know, these kids could then skate, but they were like fascinated by us just bringing all of this wood and metal to a place, using tools to build a ramp. And slowly, as the ramp sort of started becoming a ramp, I saw them sort of remember or be reminded what this thing was. And like, oh my God, that's the thing that they had last year that you can like drop in on. And they were fascinated by it. And it was a really beautiful experience of them sort of encircling us. And it almost felt like we were like a zoo exhibit. Like we were building this thing for, they didn't know it was for them. They just thought we were building this thing to skate on. And we were like, give us some, you know, we're kind of being like, you know, let us build so we can give it to you kids. Like, you know, you leave us alone a little bit. They were chasing us and asking us and being like, shoo, hey, what's this? So we ended up being like, this is for you guys. And I remember it's really beautiful because I'm in process of building and we're like, this is for you guys. And they're like, for us? You know, sort of as a question. And we ended up building it and we had a few skateboards and allowed them to sort of go into this portal and for many of them for the first time, you know. And I think in the book I introduced how I remember the first time I dropped in at the Troy Skate Park in Oakland, Michigan as like a core memory. And for me to be able to like see a bunch of kids in Palestine have this core memory was like exceptional. And it kind of it felt very special, not just in the context of just a small little ramp and a rail. I mean, that for me as a skater, it's cool and cute, but it was to build. And
Exactly. Yeah. No, I love that. I loved it. And I just have to say, like, did you not expect a bunch of children to flock around you in Palestine when you start doing stuff? Come on, man. I mean, like, it's like, so it's an amazing image. And I just think, like, I really have, I mean, I have a few more things we could talk about on the side, but this is actually sort of the main material that I was thinking about. And, you know, the I mentioned this to you kind of in passing, I think yesterday, like there's like a rhythm to the book, right? The book is really, it's kind of, it starts out again with sort of defining, as we talked about, as we showed at the beginning, sort of the built space, the way the skater sort of defies the space, defies the sort of the compression. And you talk about your father, which I want to talk about a little bit more. That I know you want to do some things. So I can show you the one image I really like that makes it think of your father. It's not of your father. It's about you, but actually. And then you sort of talk about the portal, and then you get to this moment, and it's just now that you told me that the time frame. You said 2014 to 2022. My thing was like my computer was glitching, so hopefully that was the right date. And which was like there's like this lull, this like sort of fatigue and disgust and like depletion. And actually between like page 80 to 84 and 82, I don't know if you did this on purpose, there's like no escape pictures, right? And then there's like this sort of it's punctuated with this sort of dude doing an ollie, I think, after Miss Bennett's death or something like that around there. And then you start to, it kind of blows up, and then we kind of go into the building, and then it ends up at the very last image of the horse. That's the first, so hold on to that one. This is the very first, this is an early image, right, in the beginning of the book, right? And then, yeah. So I love this image so much. I hate to say like this is my favorite image because I want to like do respect to so many images, but this one has just like really stuck with me because it's number one, and it's so humorous, right? And that's where we were talking earlier about like there's mirth in Palestine. There's happiness and joy in Palestine. This is what also like there's joy in skater, and this is what the compression, the suffocation of the Zionist entity aims to eliminate. It literally aims to eliminate the lives and the joy of Palestinians. Right. That first one, it's the image of the horse, like from the side of the Palestinians looking at this wall, the heads up against this wall. It's like Wemba Dirua, right? Then you go through eventually, and we know that there's a portal. And on this side, it's like the Hamada is looking back over us. So it's like, it can be read in so many ways. It could be read as, it's like a parody of the wall, as Jidar, right? This massive, violent wall has become this little thing, like with a peeking over of a horse, and the horse is kind of looking back at the viewer with sort of ironing or disdain. Or you can think about like maybe that's really the view of the Zionists on the other side of the checkpoint. They're pathetic, it's almost like or like the Palestinian حيوانات, right? But like شو هذا هجدار يعني بالآخر شيء, right? And it's a very funny, beautiful picture, and I just was wondering like why. Can you talk about those bookends of the Hassan, the horses?
Yeah.
We got love it.
I don't know if this was Roy's idea or I think it might have been Roy's idea. I sent him like 500 photos, so some of the editing and choreographies connected to many of our talks, but I remember the photo of the horse in the wall, the first image, yes, it was a sort of feeling of even our animals are under occupation.
Mm-hmm.
Like the head against the wall. It's in Kufr Aqab, in a ghetto. This horse is supposed to be like the Arabian horse is supposed to be like the symbol of freedom and freeing, and it's stuck against this 8-meter high wall. And I remember this photo, which is actually next to my beautiful partner's home in El Bire, Palestine. I was walking. I have a tendency to just walk a lot. I remember walking past the neighbor, and I see this horse, and I'm like staring at it. And I usually have my camera on me, but I didn't even have my settings right. Like I'm just staring at this horse, being like, he sees me, I see it, and I like pull my camera. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna photograph you. And I take the photo, and he stays there. And it totally felt like, in Arabic, the word would be khawa. It's just like, irrespective of everything, here's your horse. Like, I'm above the wall. I'm looking up. This wall is also a portal. It shapeshifts. Maybe it's a jidad and an apartheid and a separator, but in another sense, we're back to like this is a Palestinian village where the people use this horse to go graze land and tow their land. This horse is still there. Like, I see this horse 4 or 5 times a week when I'm walking. I feel like I photograph now the people who ride this horse, and I take portraits of them, and it's like a funny relationship of this horse sort of also like providing me back to this idea of landing, of like this land will for like ever be ours, whether this wall is up or not. The image of Palestine will forever be one that we can own, and totally a comical ending as the ender of the book.
I remember this image when I first saw it. It sticks in your mind. So this was the first time you saw the horse?
First time.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel like it's the first interaction that you have with this horse, and I really feel it. The way he's looking over at you is so... There's both a bit of humor, but also a little bit of coyness from his side.
He's a skater.
Yeah, and actually, I also noticed that the wall looks a little bit like a skateboard back. I noticed that earlier.
I know I would love to have Q&As from the audience, and I want to make sure that folks that might have to leave at 8 have time to ask questions. So I want to open that up to everybody. If there's anything for me or Stefan or Tamara about the book or anything we spoke about. Publishing this, like getting it actually out, was very lovely, because it was published by Roy, who helped design and edit the book, and he created a publishing house, and this is one of the inaugural publications. But the process of getting to the point to publish was very obnoxious. For people who don't know, I think people just assume that publishing a book is like this very lucrative, amazing opportunity. It's like you go broke. You pay tens of thousands of dollars as an artist to publish work. And I was naive in the entirety of this project, actually. Like, I sent Roy an email thinking this would be a one-year thing. I thought that publishing it would be easy. It took a long time of like waiting and getting a grant and reaching out to publishers, engaging with publishers, speaking, them saying yes, then realizing it's a scam where they're like, yeah, we'd love to publish your book. It's $28,000. Do you have that? No, I don't have that. Okay, can you get that? No, I can't get that. And then Roy sort of quietly in the back of my ear being like, if they don't want to do it, I will. And me being like, okay, actually, Roy, how about we just publish this book together? And it's been really lovely, because part of this whole project was kind of a confrontation with this photo book world of me and Roy forcing text, throwing it down your throat to make sure you get the context of Palestine. Me and Roy realizing that a publisher was just into Palestine as a trend, but not giving anything to the artist in terms of feeding back into this work other than paying for distribution.
Right.
And it's also a very big DIY project in that Roy created Hawawa, which is a beautiful new publishing house. And we're doing distribution sort of as skaters would do it. Like, we're doing it DIY. I'm sending it with friends. I'm in Toronto so I can bring books back to Palestine. He shipped some in weird, obscure ways to Lebanon. There's some in Dubai. It's like a sort of network we've created of guerrilla publishing that feels really good under his control. And I know at the end of the day, there's no money in this. So part of it's like, well, this is great. Like, I didn't have to pay $28,000, but I'm still able to hold this book in a way that feels like the principles of it never went astray. having been born in Palestine, but growing up in the U.S. was a really not overtly confusing experience. Like, I don't want to make it seem like it was different than anybody in the diaspora. You sort of are just thrown between these worlds, and I had a relationship with Palestine that usually involved summer visits to my grandmother and my uncle's house, and then back to suburbia for the rest of the year. And I think part of my own way of balancing them out and sort of flipping this balance was deciding that moving back to Palestine, even with some of the luxuries and conveniences that I knew I was giving up, was worth every inch or every ounce of the benefits that it provided, which was being able to be outside of Palestine as just this idea that was in my home, in my mother's kitchen, in her cooking, or in her wardrobe, or in the news, or in my studies, but instead a place where, yeah, you kind of have to be there to be there. And I knew that I had this really vile, violent green ID that in so many ways is one of the most difficult identifications to have, which is the Hawiyya, the Palestinian green ID, but it allowed me to be there. They couldn't kick me out. And like that horse, I was looking over this wall being like, well, this is my opportunity to at least try to live in Palestine. And every time, or as the years progressed, I kept still wanting to be there. And my relationship to it grew. I met my beautiful partner. I got married. I worked in a human rights organization, and I decided that's actually not my cup of tea. So I went through life in a lot of different ups and downs in Palestine. And in August, we actually moved back again after my partner finished her PhD. And still, I'm happy to be there with everything that makes it difficult. I think there's internally a very selfish rationale, which is it's a helpful place for me to always be in grip with who I am and to work through the questions that I hold. And it's easier to do that and worth giving up some of these weird luxuries that I think people think are more important than they might actually be for myself. So there's 5 skaters in this book, but they're not the 5 skaters in the West Bank. There's many others. I can go do an overview. One of them, Adham, actually moved to the US, got married and moved to the US. Aram, still in Palestine skating. Kilani, still in Palestine and skating. Kareem, he's a university student and is like into a band and all of this cool stuff now, so he's not skating as much. But I would say the most beautiful part of having gone in and out in the last few years is there's been a few times that I went back to Ramallah and randomly saw new kids skating. And for me, that's been like a really beautiful thing to see because, as you said, selfishly, this book is also to document the skate scene. And to see new kids skating is like, whoa, that's happening organically. And I'm able to witness that for somebody who's been looking at this scene since 2014. It feels really beautiful. The situation is vile in Palestine. The situation is violent and it's like really difficult to put in words in so many ways. What's happening in the north of the West Bank is the most destruction and largest scale of ethnic cleansing that the West Bank has seen since '67. The violence that's happening in Gaza is being expedited and imported into the West Bank in an exact testament to the definition of there is no border to this violence. The regime will kill and destroy Palestinians no matter where they are, as long as they are showing that there's a life force of resistance, they will kill them or attempt to kill them. And at the same time, I look to skaters actually in Gaza. I don't know if any of you follow the Gaza skate team on Instagram. If you do, I would definitely recommend it. I look to them to think of actually where I should be placing how to imagine skateboarding in this moment. And I spoke to my dear friend Rajab Rifi, who's from the north of Gaza. And he told me this beautiful, he's one of the Gaza skate team sort of OG skaters. He's a beautiful little young kid. He's not a young kid, he's my age, but it's him. He told me a story of the difficulties over the years to even get a skateboard into Gaza and to build a skate park, and how during the genocide, the last remaining skate park was destroyed because of airstrike. Just because of the shrapnel from airstrikes in the buildings around it, it destroyed the skate park. And that they went the day that the ceasefire was announced to the location of where the storage was to get the last 4 skateboards out of the rubble. And that he sent 2 of the last 4 skateboards to the south of the West Bank, to Rafah, because there was 2 skateboarders that wanted their boards, that wanted a board. There was only 4 boards, so he gave 2 of the last 4 remaining skateboards in Gaza. He sent them on donkey with his uncle to the south of Rafah so that they could skate. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to not think we should be skating if that's what they're doing? But I'm in this weird place where I haven't been, really. And I think in a lot of ways it's because skating has been a beautiful place of me being when I'm at my best, it's like my most favorite preferred thing to do. But when my headspace isn't right, it's actually really difficult to find rationale to go out and skate and be happy. In the same way that anybody who's tied to our cause and has been seeing this genocide and this violence, it's hard to be happy sometimes, knowing that you're watching the same news and that you're on the same plot of land, on the same earth, that disgusting Zionist violence is enacting on our people in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Yemen, and across our region, in U.S. campuses. I'm selfishly hoping that having launched this book and continuing to be in conversation with Rajab and some of the other skaters gets me out of this funk sometimes. And that when I go back to Palestine, the weather will be a bit nicer, and yeah, hopefully. It's a beautiful...
You should be up here.
Yeah.
Damn, that was good. That was good.
If you didn't hear, she was saying, they were saying the definition of escape felt like almost, instead of escaping war and occupation, you're actually escaping back into your normal life. And I feel that there's something kind of childlike about skating, which allows you to be a kid. And I think we're taught and trained, especially as adults, that, you know, if you're going to do sports or work out, you go to a gym and you do this. But there's a very there's like both a physical and a sort of psychic power to skateboarding as an activity. And then at the same time, as a collective, like skating is not, very rarely is skating an individual thing. You're usually skating with your friends in a place that's important to you or expansive for you. You know, you're engaging with your city. And I think definitely like skating, it takes you somewhere else, and that somewhere else could be, as you had said, it could be this purposeful escape. It could be just to a breath of fresh air. It's funny because I actually, in 2014, started documenting it as a documentary, as a video. It was a documentary called Kickflips Over Occupation, which came out in 2015, and it kind of was an introduction to this work. It was mostly like just short perform interviews with some of these skaters. Some of them are the same ones. There's actually two of the skaters from that 2015 who are in this book. And I felt like doing it in the book gave me more room to speak, both in my voice and their voice almost, visually, like less about speaking in terms of just conversation, but a photo is a beautiful way to just like stop the viewer into this world where a visual medium sometimes is a kind of bit overwhelming, where a photo you control a bit more of it. Present, past, present.
Present progressive.
Present. I got a C in English.
So did I, and I still ended up awarding.
I think the biggest probe to wanting the text to be in the book was a lot of the conversations Roy and I were having just on Zoom, just like having these interesting philosophy conversations about Palestine and the work, and me like adding bits and pieces and then realizing like, oh, I think I had written that in like a journal entry or something a long time ago, and I actually was encouraged by Roy to write, or he encouraged me to add more text, and I think I took that like very seriously. I left conversations that we had for like 5 months, and I sort of gave myself my own little art residency in my apartment post work, where I went through my archive and went through all of my images from 2014 to 2021 very slowly, just looking at my images and sort of like placing myself back in that moment. Went through Facebook messages that I had with all these skaters, conversations I had with all these skaters, and there were a few sort of like symbolic points that I knew were already entries that I had begun or interviews that I had done, and I sort of dove quite deeply into creating a story that completely outside of the confines of the photos could be read on its own, that followed chronologically from my first experience seeing these Palestinian skaters in 2014 to building that DIY park. And in my head, I kind of always knew that that was a sort of through line for this work, but I hadn't written any of it formally. So I think I spent, and my partner can attest to this, every day after work, like just tweaking on my laptop, just like looking at these photos and writing and really discombobulated thoughts. But then sent it to Roy, and he was like, this is incredible and great, we need this. And I worked with a really wonderful copy editor named Camelia Youssef, who's a Lebanese American, who, as you can see in lots of this text, sort of encouraged me to think of the words also as if I was skateboarding. So she threw some of these words like on the left side of the page or on the right side of the page, or sometimes they go in and sometimes it goes out. And it allowed me to sort of use the text as well as a sort of, I kind of felt like I was power sliding or skateboarding across my pages. And Roy and I sort of sat together to dissect which of these entries were relevant to have, which ones we could do without. And we don't have this slide, but we had like it looks, that meme of the Always Sunny in Philadelphia character where he's like pointing at all the charts. Roy and I had a Miro board, which is like a board where we designed this stuff, and it looked exactly like that, of like critical text entry photos look like this, and day in the life entry photos look like that, and prose looks like this. And we sort of, he created a formula where these different texts, we could section them off into a different theme, and throughout had them actually in a lot of ways determine what the photo would look like. Like the text is the backbone of the book, and the photos sometimes serve as just little assets. Again, using that contradiction to the sort of typical photo book where, text is usually at the last 2 pages and an acknowledgement, and that's sort of it.
To end, I wanted to thank you for creating this beautiful and important document. And yeah, so thank you for that. Thank you for this conversation.